Good morning. In the studio with me today are two writers who have both made a name for themselves and won some of the top prizes, but became professional writers by quite different routes. First you, Tom. What made you want to become a writer?
I could say that I always wanted to be a writer, but for a long time I had no idea of what I wanted to do as a career. But it was always there in my mind. I was an avid reader, as all writers are, but I didn't get down to any serious writing until after I left school. I couldn't understand those children at school who knew from the age of, say, 13 or 14 exactly what career they wanted to follow, be it lawyer, doctor, banker, soldier, and there were several of those. I went to the kind of school where middling income and military types sent their sons. Many were following going into the family business. I thought, you're too young to decide now. You need to go out there and try different things before you decide.
And did you?
Well, I have done several kinds of job, mainly menial, as did some of my writing heroes, but that was from economic necessity. You see, at first I had this romantic notion of what a writer's life was like. I had been reading the American writers of the early and middle 20th century, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and so on, and they seemed to have a wonderful time. If you read their biographies, it seems that all they did was have parties and travel to exotic places and meet interesting people. That's the life for me, I thought. I was slow to ask questions like when they found the time to write and where the money came from, but I got there in the end.
What about you, Sally? Is it something you always wanted to do?
Yes, it was. I'm a bit like one of Tom's schoolmates who followed in their fathers', both parents in my case, footsteps. They were journalists, not novelists, but writing was part of our lives. I just seemed to have absorbed it and started writing a diary as soon as I could put pen, or rather crayon, to paper. Soon it felt like a bad day if I hadn't written something. At that age, the world was a marvel, full of wonders and strange, to a child, goings-on. It still is.
Now, you've both been journalists at one time or another. Was that helpful to you as a fiction writer?
I wasn't a journalist who went out hunting for stories. I was asked to review 1 or 2 books after my first novel was published. The editor liked what I'd done and I got a weekly column. It's helpful in that it keeps me in the loop about what's going on in contemporary fiction, but the downside is it takes up time that should be spent writing my own stuff. And time is at a premium because I have 2 young children, and that's pretty much a full-time job in itself. On the plus side again, it keeps my critical faculties sharp because you have to be a good critic of your own work. And the money helps, of course. You can't live off what your fiction earns you unless you're a bestseller. You need a regular income, especially with a family.
Tom?
Yes, you need a steady flow of cash, even though I've managed to avoid the pram in the hallway, a famous enemy of promise. Was journalism helpful? I think so, yes, and I still take on assignments when offered them when I need the cash. I think it helps in that with news stories you should keep out the personal. It's not about you or how you feel, but about others and the world at large. You get to know a lot more about the variety of life and other cultures firsthand than you ever could if you just sat at your desk conjuring up imaginary worlds. Don't get me wrong, some great novels have been written that way, but I think writing is enriched by greater experience. But I think too many writers these days are self-absorbed and their books shine a light on little more than their personalities, which may or may not be interesting.
Well, we each do what we can to cultivate the patch of ground we've been given to cultivate. I went straight from school to do a creative writing course at university, and my first novel was published shortly after that. So I haven't seen as much of the world as Tom or experienced the dangers he has covering disaster areas.
I wasn't including you in that category. You have the talent to go with the craftsmanship of the true writer. I'm still dreaming of parties and exotic travel.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there as we've run out of time. Thank you both for joining us at this early hour.